Good morning or good afternoon to some of you, and welcome to the Reuse Company webinars. You will be muted during the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat box. But please address your comments to the Reuse Company and not directly to the presenter. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat box, or you can also send an email to support@reusecompany.com. The webinar will be recorded, and in a few days, we will send you the link to the recording. Requirements completeness, tips and tricks towards high-quality specifications. My name is Cecilia Karlsson, and I will be hosting today's webinar. With me, I have Jose Fuentes, Chief Operating Officer at the Reuse Company. Good morning, Jose.
Good morning, Cecilia.
Let's take a look at the table of contents. First, we'll have a short presentation about the company and the presenter. Then Jose will explain what requirements completeness is. Next, we'll see some tips and tricks, and after that, we will take a look at completeness for individual requirements and completeness for sets of requirements. Then Jose will talk about the Systems Engineering Suite and the CCC Approach. We will see a live demonstration, and finally, we will have some time for questions and answers. So first, a few words about the Reuse Company. The Reuse Company was created in 1991 as a spin-off from a university in Madrid by system and software engineers. Our headquarters is in Madrid, but we also have an office in Stockholm, in Sweden, and a delegation in Tokyo, Japan. In 2022, we are planning to open an office in the US. Our mission is to promote a reusable, scalable, and global solution to a smart and interoperable systems engineering environment. And we do this by offering a semantic, knowledge-centric approach. The Reuse Company is also called TRC. We like to say that it's easy to remember if you think of T like in traceability, R like in reuse, and C or almost Q like in quality. You can also apply these concepts to other topics. Now let me introduce you to the presenter, Jose Fuentes. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the Reuse Company, and he has been the product manager of the Systems Engineering Suite tools for more than 5 years. He has the INCOSE CCEP certification and is graduated in the INCOSE Institute for Technical Leadership. Jose is also an active contributor to the INCOSE Guide for Writing Requirements. So, Jose, let's start with today's topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you all of you for joining me in this for this webinar. I hope you like the topic. For me, this is a really important topic when it comes to the overall quality of our requirements and the overall quality of our projects. Indeed, speaking about the quality of our projects, I like to go down to this CAOS report and the different editions of this CAOS report. Perhaps I believe that most of you already know this CAOS report and what could be somehow the result of an average project where half of the projects are somehow challenged. According to this CAOS report, a project that is not successful, is not failed, but it is challenged, is a project that aims at least to reach to the end, but somehow not meeting the limits in budget, limits in time, or not reaching all the expected scope and capabilities for the system, right? So this is what, according to this CAOS report, is a challenge project, right? So the question is why or what factors are making that less than 1/3 of our projects are eventually successful projects, right? Then after this chart, there are some other tables in the CAOS report depicting a little bit what are these factors and some of the consequences. So they, in the CAOS report, they like to split and have two different standpoints that seems to be similar, but in fact there are two different interpretations. One is, of course, what are the success factors? Which factors we have to take care the most towards a high quality project. However, together with that, there is also another table, let's say, containing the failure factors, right? So now it depends on if you are a positive person or negative person. You will think of the positive or the negative, but I believe that we have to learn from those negative factors. And then if we look carefully, then we find that the most impacting or negative or failure factor, according to this CAUS report, is requirements incompleteness. Wow, this is the topic of today's webinar. This is very nice. The second one here is the lack of user involvement. And to me, the lack of user involvement is triggering these incomplete requirements. So these two blocks are the ones that has been ranked the most important failure factors. And to me, both factors are going hand in hand. So it is like the two coins of the two sides of the same coin, clearly, right? So, and what is an incomplete requirement, right? So let me look it out from two different standpoints. The first one is a typical dictionary, where we can also already learn a little bit. So something that is incomplete is something is lacking, something that lacks a usually a necessary part, element, or a step. Well, when it comes to requirements, then we can rely a little bit on INCOSE and the INCOSE guide for requirements to describe that the requirements set stands alone such that it is sufficiently describes the necessary capabilities, characteristics, constraints, interfaces, standards, regulations, and or quality factors to meet the entity needs without needing other additional information. So this is what is considered as a complete specification, right? I also like to add the concept of minimum and sufficiently describe these characteristics, right? From this definition, we can learn a little bit more than from the previous one, from the Webster's dictionary, mainly because it includes the notion of sets of requirements. I will cover today two different perspectives towards the quality or the completeness of requirements. One, as Cecilia mentioned before, one for the quality of individual items, individual requirements, while we will also address the idea of completeness from the global standpoint, completeness for a set of requirements. Could be a document, could be a folder containing several documents or whatever. So this is the first important topic. The second is that even in this definition, normally when we think of requirements, there are people defining requirements like the definition of the necessary capabilities. But sometimes we forget that our specifications should also speak about characteristics, constraints, interfaces, the way we address standards, regulations, comply with regulations, and some other quality functions and non-functional requirements, right? So in this definition, I like this extended definition of what a specification should be, because it is somehow giving us the key of what we should never forget, right? And with the idea of minimum and sufficiently sufficient, it comes how or why this idea of completeness is, to me, the most challenging one when addressing high quality specifications. Because let's put it in this way. If I am given a set of requirements to describe a problem that is to be solved by means of a system, then one requirement more could be meaning that either a requirement is duplicated, it is overspecified, or it is going beyond the expected scope of my system. While one requirement less could be meaning that I am missing one of those capabilities or characteristics or regulation or quality factor that, as it is very well said in the definition here, it is necessary part for my system, right? So one more, it is too much. One less, we are missing something important. This is why it is that difficult to know when to stop, when you are done when it comes to collecting or eliciting requirements, right? And all this in our approach, we will be following a little bit the INCOSE guide for written requirements, but you will also see later that it is not that complete, let's say, the guide itself. This is a picture coming from this INCOSE guide for writing requirements. These are the 14 high-level quality characteristics, right? Perhaps you know the INCOSE guide for the 41 quality rules, but on top of the quality rules, it comes a number of different high-level quality characteristics. In the current version of the guide, there are 14 different quality characteristics, 5 addressing the quality of sets of requirements, those ones in green, and 9 addressing the quality of individual requirements, those in orange or yellow or whatever, right? So what is a little bit shocking to me is that even if we have just 2 slides ago defined that requirements completeness is the most impacting failure factor in a regular project, there are only 3 metrics addressing completeness of sets of requirements, right? So this is somehow strange, at least to me, right? It is clear, of course, that when it comes to the quality of individual requirements, yes, there are now 12 different metrics to address the quality of individual requirements, right? But even this 12 is far below the number of metrics addressing ambiguity or the number of metrics addressing verifiability. So to me, it is a little bit strange that knowing that requirements completeness is that important, the number of metrics to address these topics, this topic is somehow limited, right? So why? I don't know why. Okay, so these are the this is a chart including all those metrics, the 41 metrics in the current version of the INCOSE guide, as I said. These are all the different quality characteristics on the top, the 14 characteristics, and here with this tick you can see which rules are affecting which of those different quality characteristics, right? So the 3 for the completeness for sets of requirements, and the 9 for the completeness of individual requirements. There is also another way to understand this guide, which is chapter by chapter, and there is a chapter for completeness. And within this completeness chapter, there are only 2 rules. So it is somehow a little bit contradictory to me, the way INCOSE is addressing completeness. And this is why we have decided to create our own interpretation of what requirements completeness is, right? And of course, I have to mention that it is not easy. Why? Because to me, requirements completeness has to do a lot with extracting or interviewing a number of different stakeholders and subject matter experts to elucidate all those requirements. And when it comes to personal communication with people, perhaps coming from different teams, different countries, different cultures, different everything, well, there are some difficulties. So a number of different soft skills has to be developed in order as to be capable of managing or extracting those requirements in an efficient way, right? So let me give you some tips and tricks before we get into some more automatic analysis of your specifications. Let me go and start with some high-level tips and tricks. The first one is every stakeholder mind. Every stakeholder is important. Most of the times we think of our system in the center of this circle, or in the center of this shape, and then we think of the first and direct stakeholders, the users mainly, the client, because he or she is going to pay the development of the system, and perhaps that's all. But we have to consider that our system is normally part of a larger system, and this larger system is playing a kind of role in a larger ecosystem or environment, right? So please consider all those, even the wider environment, and consider every single actor and stakeholder in this wider environment. Then you will find that, for instance, for a military vehicle, of course, NATO, even if you don't deal directly with NATO, but NATO is a stakeholder for you, right? The enemy, of course, it is another, or the opponents, as in this picture, it is a stakeholder. I don't expect you to go and visit your enemy and collect requirements from your enemy, but at least any one of you in your team shall take the role of the enemy and think as an enemy, so that you can see what could be the possible ideas that your enemy has to defeat you, right? And work with all those ideas again, also in your system as requirements to prevent the attack for the opponents in this case, right? So every single stakeholder is important. So please do collect a table of stakeholders. Develop your strategy how to address the different stakeholders, because of course every one of us, every human involved in a project is different, and perhaps the strategy to deal with all those stakeholders will be different, right? So every one of us will require a different strategy to communicate. Following tip is do not focus just on users. This is something that, for example, when people say, okay, I'm collecting requirements, I'm doing user stories. Wow, this is very nice, because you are pretty much focused on the user. However, there are plenty of the dimensions that you will have to take care of, right? This picture is just an example with different, the 7 dimensions, like not only user, of course, user is important, but also interfaces, actions, data, control, environment, and of course, a number of different quality attributes, non-functional requirements, right? So all those dimensions are equally important, and not only the vision on the user. And of course, do not forget safety requirements as a very, very important factor when it comes to describe the requirements in aerospace and defense, in healthcare, in automotive, railway, etc., etc. Please do not forget this dimension of the safety requirements. More tricks is please start with a clear taxonomy of different types of requirements in mind, right? Whenever I speak about this topic, I like this one. This is the taxonomy that is expressed in the NASA Systems Engineering Handbook, and I like this because it is huge, right? It is even larger than the one promoted by the European Space Agency or some other similar taxonomies, right? But this, at least just by having in mind all those possible different types of requirements, then chances for forgetting requirements of any or other particular types are somehow reduced, right? So please, before you start writing down your requirements, think of what should be the taxonomy of different types of requirements for your systems. In most of the case, this taxonomy will be fully same or very similar to the taxonomy that you have used in a previous project. So there is no need to reinvent the wheel over and over. You just define with your project or program office, just define what the taxonomy should be, and just adapt it a little bit to the particularities of the different projects. But globally speaking, 90% of this taxonomy will remain the same, right? More tips, questions and questions and questions. I said before, stakeholders matter. Stakeholders are important, but to me also questions are important. If I have a list of stakeholders that I don't know what to ask, then I'm lost, and I will come out with an incomplete requirement specification. So for me, every single question is important. Important to start with the what versus running and rushing very quickly into the how, but mainly asking the critical question, which is the why. Why? Sometimes it is difficult to ask why many times. Normally, when you interview someone and you use the word why 2 or 3 times in 10 minutes, then the other person could feel a little bit nervous, because the why is like, wow, this guy is challenging me. Well, so I don't know why, but this guy is asking why so many times that I feel nervous a little bit, or I am not feeling comfortable in this meeting, and then I want to close the meeting as soon as possible, right? So in order to avoid that, there are many ways of using a what in different ways to represent the same as a why, but avoiding the why that is a little bit a tricky question, right? But of course, think of all those different types of questions, like what system of interest, what entities, what interfaces, who, reminding stakeholders, but mainly in this case, users who should be using the system, what functions has to be offered, how much or how many performance, under what conditions, how quick, how well, and mainly while and when. So these two questions are just to represent states or modes, and are just to represent what are the triggers that are launching a particular requirement, right? Because what I find many times when it comes to write requirements for a system, what I find many times is that people tend to write requirements like this, like this example here, right? So if we describe a requirement for a car, then I find system requirements like the car shall accelerate 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in less than 10 seconds. Well, it seems to be a good requirement. I don't know if this is the average now in a modern car or not, but okay, let's put it like that. If you know a little bit about requirements patterns, then you could identify that this is exactly what in the ER's approach, ER's stands for easy approach for requirements syntax, what is called an ubiquitous requirement, right? The structure for a ubiquitous requirement is this one in here. It is very, very easy. The system name shall system response. In my example, the car system name shall, and the response is to accelerate 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, and the performance, which is not explicitly here, but we could consider that it is part of the response, is to be done in less than 10 seconds, right? So if I ask you, do you find this requirement a proper requirement? And you could say, well, yes, it is meeting the pattern, so well, it seems to be okay. However, my question could be, do you want your car to accelerate 0 to 100 always at any single point? Even when you start the car in your garage, you get up in the morning, get into your car, then press the start button, and suddenly, what? 0 to 100. The result could be probably like happened to this guy in the garage, so rushing into the house of the neighbor, right? So that means somehow that the structure of a complete requirement should be a little bit different. If we think of the questions that I was mentioning before, the why, the when, the what, and the how much, and so on, then we could rephrase this requirement in something like, do you want your car to accelerate always? No, no, no. Only when the gearbox is in D and the parking brake is not engaged. This is clear. And as soon as I put my car in D and release the parking brake, do I want to have this acceleration? No, no, no. Only when the driver is stepping the gas pedal. And then when these two conditions happen, the car is in this state, and this event happen, then the car shall do something. Perhaps not accelerate this stepping the gas pedal. Perhaps it is not to accelerate. It is just to open a valve or whatever, or to release the piston so that the piston is doing something. I'm not expert on automotive. I'm not expert on engines, but something has to happen. Perhaps not accelerating, but opening or releasing and other activities. And of course, the reaction time has to be included here. In this case, is less than 200 seconds. This something in the engine has happened so that the car starts his moving. However, not 100% in 2 milliseconds, of course, but in a way that eventually reaches this limit in 10 seconds. So there has to be some engineering behind to allow that if I step the gas pedal, the power that is offered by the engine and the way the wheels are moving the car allows me to meet this high-level requirement. But the requirement for a system has to be this. This is a complete requirement for a system. This is not a complete requirement for a system, right? So this is at least my standpoint. And when it comes to define requirements, more things that in my experience, I have found many times is that people normally focus on the utilization phase, right? So, okay, please think of requirements for a car. If I ask you all, okay, give me 10 requirements for a car, perhaps most of you, 90% of your requirements will be in the way how the car is is performing actions for the user, for the driver, as the main user. However, you have to think of some other alternative or secondary actors as well. So people maintaining your car and even people retiring your car. For those of you dealing with software, retiring your software is very easy. You just right-click and install, and that's all. Goodbye. However, suppose that you are dealing with nuclear submarines. The way to retire a nuclear submarine will require, for sure, a lot of requirements for the disposal phase, right? So please consider all those aspects in the life cycle, because you will be capable of extracting requirements for all of them. Even for the development, perhaps you will have to develop a system that allows you to build the main system, or that allows you to test the main system, right? All those are requirements, and you will have to consider all those requirements, including also the requirements for the transition between the company or the team building the system and the team which is expected to use the system for the first time. There is a transition there. In terms of data, perhaps there will be a transmission of data from an old system into a new system. All this also has to be represented by means of requirements. And if you don't represent those requirements, your requirement specification will not be complete, right? So please have all this in mind. More things that people normally tend to forget is we are all very positive guys. We don't like negativity, but life is like that, right? So we normally like to think of the possible scenarios for a system, and then we think of the so-called happy path, right? So when I want to withdraw money in from my bank, the ATM in my bank, then I think of the steps. Okay, what are the steps? I take the card, introduce the card, enter the PIN number, enter the amount, and then I withdraw my money, and goodbye. That's all, right? Well, this is, of course, this could be a possible scenario. However, the system has to be prepared for all the scenarios. What if I enter wrong PIN number? What if I enter a wrong number 3 times? What if the amount is not sufficient? What is the amount is exceeding the limit in my account? What is the amount is exceeding the limit of notes in the bank? Oof, there are so many different alternative scenarios or unwanted scenarios, and all of them has to be covered with requirements, right? So we tend to write requirements for the happy path, but not for the so-called rainy days. What happens if whatever? So you will have to write requirements for all those scenarios, including not only the scenarios that are available for let's say a regular user, but also the scenarios that are open for malicious user, let's say. So I like the technique of use cases, but some years ago I learned something that is called misuse cases, right? Where there are some actors now represented in black, as you can see here, all this part of the use case diagram here, which is not depicting what are the regular legal operations that a normal user can do. However, you think of what the system, or in which ways, what requirements has to be implemented so that the possible malicious actions that could be triggered by this hacker guy here are somehow blocked by my system, right? So we have to think also on this. So security is also a key important factor, and most in nowadays, where a car is made up of software and connectivity. My car can connect to my cell phone and can connect to the car in front. So all this is opening the door for malicious users to do bad things to my car, let's say, right? So that we have to write requirements to prevent all these operations from those non-authorized users aiming at attacking my system. So requirements also for the black use cases described here in this diagram. More ideas. Let's try them. This is early in the morning, and let's say for the Europeans, I have just done my daily meditation as I normally do every single day. So I like to apply these kind of principles to writing requirements, believe it or not. And I found a lot of similarities, for instance, between the elicitation of requirements and disciplines like, for instance, mindfulness, right? So if you think of the principles of mindfulness, first one is non-judgment. And this applies pretty much because I have seen this so many times that when people think of the different stakeholders, we tend to say, okay, this and this and this, wow, we can collect a lot of requirements from those stakeholders, but that and that, and well, no, I don't think these are good stakeholders. So perhaps we are not going to interview these stakeholders, right? The idea is, no, there are not good or bad stakeholders. You can learn from all of them. There are not good and bad subject matter experts. All of them will have their own standpoint, and you will be capable of collecting requirements from all of them. Second principle, be patient. You cannot collect all the requirements for a complex system in one day. This is not possible, right? So please keep doing and keep working, and eventually you will find a complete specification, but do not try to do it in one day. And of course, start these interviews with the so-called beginner's mind. Do not force your own solution or your own ideas. Listen first, right? So normally what happens is the typical idea of, well, okay, I will be visiting this stakeholder, but I think that I know much more than this. I think that I am the best subject matter expert in the world. So why do I have to interview him or her? But okay, I will interview, but my ears and my mind is closed. While what I have to do is try to empty my mind with all the previous concepts or ideas that I might have, and listen, actively listen. And of course, be confident and trust the stakeholders, right? Of course, you will have to contrast a little bit the ideas coming from the different stakeholders, but at least be confident with them, and accept that some workshops will address more needs, or you will be capable of extracting more requirements, while some others not, right? So be patient, accept all this, and just keep it up, right? So these are principles that I try to apply in my everyday life. My everyday life also includes requirements elicitation. So why not applying this also to elicitation of requirements? And even from the Zen practice, or these Zen quotes to me are important when it comes to writing requirements or to eliciting requirements. This couple of quotes, if you are familiar with this, you will find it common sentences. Perhaps for others you will find like, wow, what the hell? But there are these two quotes, Zen quotes. If you walk, just walk. If you sit, just sit. But whatever you do, don't wobble. It is like when hungry, eat your rice, and when tired, close your eyes. And to me, I have taken the license to write my own third statement, Zen, and requirements management statement, which is, when dealing with requirements, really deal with your requirements and do not rush into a solution, which is pretty much the same. So what I find from the people when I act as an expert and someone else is interviewing me to extract requirements, what I see from the people in front of me trying to extract my requirements is that they are aiming at rushing very quickly into a solution, even before asking me what my needs are, right? And this is not what we have to do, right? So please accept these kind of principles when you deal with your requirements, right? And it is not only that we can learn from these disciplines like Zen approach or mindfulness. I also like neurolinguistic programming. And I love this quote, which is one of the key aspects of this discipline. The map is not the territory. In fact, it is pretty much similar with what we have mentioned in the previous slide. The idea is that if there are 10 people speaking about the same system, you will all think in a different way. I hope you have seen this typical image of the elephant and the 10 engineers touching the leg, or touching the tail, or touching the teeth, or touching the ear. So every one of them is thinking of a different animal, but in the end, it is an elephant, right? So in this approach, the map is not the territory. In this approach, the elephant itself is the territory, but no one of us have the proper view of this territory, of this elephant, and what we have is a map. This map is not representing the territory, it's representing the territory according to our mental filters. And the mental filters that any one of us are growing are there because of the experience that we have lived for all along our life. So the mental filters that you apply will be different to the mental filters that I apply. So the way you see a system is different to the way I see the same system. And I cannot say that my view is the correct one, and I cannot say that your view is the correct one, unless I do the effort of interviewing all different stakeholders and subject matter experts. I will not be capable of extracting the complete representation of this system, of this territory. That, of course, will not be the territory itself, but at least it will be the best map possible to address this territory, right? And well, if we continue speaking about this NLP, neurolinguistic programming, then we could think of generalization, thinking that the particularities are forgotten, or delation, when we remove important aspects just due to the fact that we think that they are not important, but could be important for someone else, right? So please try to not forget this if you want to come out with a complete set of advice, right? And before I enter in the practical part, just some final tips, like identification of all the stakeholders. Completeness is a perception of the mandatory needs of those stakeholders. If you miss a stakeholder, then you are missing requirements, clearly. If you miss the important questions for a stakeholder, you will be missing requirements. So use requirements checklist, use templates for the document itself. Remember the taxonomies of different types of requirements that I mentioned before. The structure of each individual statement in a requirement is also important. If you already start with the patterns to avoid the issue, for instance, when I was showing you the car and the acceleration example, if you have the full pattern with all the different blocks conforming a well-formed requirement, then you will come out with complete individual requirements. Remember that attributes and links are also part of the requirements statement, right? The expression, in this case, the requirements expression. So please consider if you have given all the possible values for the attributes and all the possible links to risks, to higher level, to lower level. If not, your requirement will not be complete. Of course, improve the communication skills of your business analyst and think of the different strategies to communicate with the different stakeholders, establish a formal inspection process, consider, this is to me key as well, consider the elicitation of requirements as an iterative and recursive process. This is what systems engineering means, and this is what is making the elicitation of requirements that complex, this idea of recursivity and iterative iteration. And of course, think that in cascading down your requirements, if the first layer of those requirements is not complete, nothing can be done to have a complete set of requirements in the following layer, right? So please think of the quality and the completeness of your requirements and needs from the very first day, right? And final quote, speaking about questions, I have mentioned the idea of asking questions so many times that to me, I normally apply this. It is smarter to ask too many questions and look like an idiot the first day, because you ask too much, perhaps, than not asking at all any single question and demonstrating that you are actually an idiot the last day of the project, right? So please apply this in your daily life when it comes to extracting requirements. Don't think that you know everything and you don't have to ask questions to every single stakeholder in the project. Asking the right questions is the key to requirements completeness, right? So that's all for philosophy and these kind of ideas and Bob and all these guys. And let's try to do it a little bit more practical. And so let me introduce you the systems engineering suite. I think some of you already know these tools and our CCC approach, right? The systems engineering suite is conformed by 5 tools, but there are 3 mainly or directly related with the quality of requirements. The first one is RQA, which is the tool that allows you to connect to external requirements repositories in the market. The RAT authoring tool is the tool that is an add-on on top of those tools. so that those rules that you have customized a little bit with the RQA can be applied in real time in the moment when you are writing requirements. And I will be mentioning now a lot about models. Our approach to connect to modeling tools is by means of the tool KEM Knowledge Manager. This is the tool that allows you to connect to different modeling tools in the market, right? So I will speak about these three, and in the demo, I will mention these three. Well, this pyramid is the approach that we follow when it comes to address the quality of requirements. And this is the CCC approach to us. So CCC stands for correctness. Correctness is when we address the quality for individual requirements, while consistency and completeness when we address the quality of sets of requirements. Completeness, as I said, is a little bit special because it has two standpoints. One is completeness as a set, and the other one is completeness as an individual requirement. So completeness is somehow in here, in between. And I will show you some practical tips with the tool to address completeness in these two levels, right? So first, completeness for sets of requirements, right? For us, the best way to address completeness for sets of requirements is when comparing the information that is coming from models with information that our tool can extract automatically from a textual requirement. So remember that our tools will be applying natural language processing tools and artificial intelligence to extract the meaningful pieces of information from a requirement, so that once this information is well extracted and represented under the form of semantic graphs, then it can be compared in a very easy way with information from models. Let me give you a couple of examples. In this example, on the top, you have a product breakdown structure, and our main system, which is the temperature warrior, conformed by 5 systems: the temperature system, the power system, the management system, the control system, and the temperature actuator. And the following level describing subsystems and components and parts and pieces, right? So if we think of this and we take as a reference these 5 requirements here, then just by following the requirement, the temperature warrior shall have a control system. At least we know that the guy writing the requirement has in mind or knows that he or she has to deal with a system called temperature warrior. So we can tick, oh, temperature warrior has been considered. And this temperature warrior shall have a control system. Well, this guy knows that there has to be a control system for the temperature warrior as a kind of subsystem. And if we go ahead, then, oh, yes, we didn't forget about what is the maximum weight of this temperature warrior. We know that it needs to have a power system and a management system, and the management system, a configuration system. Perhaps this requirement should not be here in this document, should be in a different document. As I will show you in the live demo, you can have the RQA tool analyzing requirements in different documents at the same time. So the idea is that at least if we only consider these 5 requirements, we know that this guy is addressing all these topics with the green ticks in here. And perhaps if our specification was ending here, well, this guy writing this specification is forgetting about all this. So my specification is not complete, and the reason is because all those elements with the red cross here are not addressed at all in my specification, if my specification was as short as these 5 requirements. Of course, if you consider a full document, then you will find that there will be lots of more green ticks in the document. If I try now to address other diagrams like an FBS, functional breakdown structure, or a state chart, then we can do exactly the same. So let's take now as a reference these 4 requirements. When the temperature warrior is loaded and operating, the temperature warrior shall enter the authentication mode. At least we know that we haven't forget about this authentication mode. Well, the temperature warrior is in post-combat mode. Well, and this trigger happens, the control system shall activate the configuration mode. We know that there is something about configuration mode, and since I was in this mode and then this trigger makes me go into this other mode, we don't only know that these 2 modes are mentioned, but also the transition itself is also mentioned, right? For the following one, when in validation mode, then we can tick validation mode. The temperature warrior shall validate the required parameters. This is exactly the name of one of our functions. So we can go and tick this function. This function in the FBS is at least mentioned once. And of course, we can go ahead. It's in combat mode, this one. The temperature warrior shall display, which is another function. So we can tick the function. And as I did before, if my specification was complete, or aiming to be complete now, then we know for sure that there is nothing about this other state. There is nothing about this transition here and there and this and that, and nothing about these other functions. So of course, if you address a full specification, you will not see all those red crosses, but at least this is a kind of checklist that allows the engineer writing those requirements to know that at least all the expected elements are somehow mentioned, right? Well, for individual requirements now, remember the first trick was to follow patterns to help you not forget the conditions, the while, the when, and remember the example of the acceleration. Of course, when dealing with numbers, when the temperature is over 30 what? 30 Celsius, 30 Fahrenheit, please, every number has to be followed by either a unit or an entity, right? Also, tolerances. If I say when the level of oil is 5 liters, the car shall do something, 5 liters. It is very difficult to take a measure and say, oh, it is 5. Because most of the times it will be 5.001 or 4.999, but 5.00000 is really difficult, right? So please consider where you have to use also tolerances. And of course, avoid things like the typical TBD, TBC, or saying something like etc. or among others. The system has to react to these states among others. So this is, of course, an incomplete specification and an incomplete, right? Also mind, as I mentioned before, attributes and links are also making conforming the expression of your requirement. So if you have no links, perhaps your requirement is not complete. Or if you are missing the value for an attribute, your requirement is not complete. And this can make your requirement not traceable or not rankable or not verifiable just due to the fact that you have forgotten some of these attributes, right? So I think I have some time for at least a couple of quick demos. Without any further ado, let me start with the first one. So in this first demo, I have used Capella. So this is Capella with a set of logical components and the composition of these logical components. So this is the temperature warrior I was mentioning before. In this instance of Capella, we have installed a special add-on, which is the authoring tool. Our authoring tool add-on can be installed on top of Capella to collect all those requirements and be capable of doing things with interesting quality things with these requirements, right? So let me start the RAT grid now. So we connect, and we can show the grid containing all those requirements. Now, this is a different way of representing requirements in Capella. It is now more similar to the way to see requirements in other tools like DOORS or any other regular requirements management system. In here, I can create new requirements, and I have a lot of modes. The first one could be fully free typing. So let me start with free typing. You can see that the tool is not helping you in writing your requirement so that you can eventually you can make mistakes. So when the temperature warrior is in combat mode and when the temperature is larger than or equal 80, it shall decrease temperature, right? So in here, to the right, you can see like the tool is detecting that the 8 is not welcome and the 80 has to be followed by numbers, right? So these are the two issues that are detected by the tool, right? So what can I do? Of course, I can manually, once that I know the issues, I can try to fix this issue, or I can try to ask the tool to help me from the beginning by following a specific pattern, right? And this is what I'm going to do now. I'm Once I check all this, then I can remove the current content of my requirement so that I could pick one of the patterns that is offered by the tool. So this is the list of patterns. I want to write a pattern, I want to write a requirement with this structure, while state, when trigger, and system and the response. And what you can do is you can ask the tool, if this is the pattern I want to follow, and this is the actual text I have written for this requirement, what is the first point which is missing? What is the first point which is not following the structure, the expected structure? Then you click in this question mark icon, and then you see the elements in red, in dark red, that are the elements that are not followed. So that you can see that the first element, which is not well written, is that numbers has to be followed by units or quantifiers, while I just wrote 80 without nothing else up to the 80, right? So if I write 80 Celsius, then I can see to the right that now the tool is just having one issue. Of course, the pattern remains in red because there is this one issue. So let the tool guide you where the issue is, and the issue is that you are missing the system name. The it is replacing the system name, so please avoid the it and write the system name. You could just do it quickly by removing the it and naming a system name, but let me show you how, if you activate the writing assistance here on the top in the menu, you go and activate the writing assistance, and then the tool is offering you all those possibilities. The possibilities, when it comes to write the content of your requirement, the possibilities are coming from the model itself. So all those elements in there are the elements in the system. And when it comes to write, for instance, modes, all the modes that appear in front of you will be the modes that are coming from the system, and so on and so forth, right? So now, after the 80, the tool will is going to suggest that I write something like a unit. And when it comes to write the main statement, all those name of elements that appear in the screen are actually the elements in the model. So when you pick an element from the model, you see like the tool is underlining, hyperlinking this element name, letting you know that this is the name of one of the elements. For the other ones that I have already written, you can do it afterwards. And now these four elements are naming elements in the model, making that when I save this requirement, now that it's on the screen, I can save the requirement. If I go after that and modify the name of one of those elements, then the tool will modify automatically the text of my requirement according to the new name of this element. If I change the name of the combat mode into whatever, then automatically the tool will do this change for me. The tool automatically is creating all the possible links and connections in the different diagrams. Doesn't matter how many diagrams you have, this name of the temperature warrior or the name of the combat mode. If I go now and open the state chart, then I will see, like as soon as I drop my requirement here, the trace appears automatically, right? And I think that's all for the same for the function. That's all for this first short video, short use case. Let me show you a second one, which is now not only RQA, but mainly, sorry, not only RAT, the offering tool, but mainly now is the RQA, right? So now this is RQA connecting to requirements and specification in doors, in this case, but letting this ontology know that there is a model behind, there is a Capella model behind. So even if I am on top of doors, and these are all the formal modules in doors, even if I am on top of doors, the tool knows that there is a model, and this model is describing a number of different product breakdown structures or functional breakdown structures, or a number of states and modes and so on and so forth. So all this is available to me, even if I was writing requirements on top of those, right? So let me open a formal module in doors. I can check completeness of a set of different modules, but to keep it quick, I'm just selecting one document with 137 requirements. So these are all my requirements. And let me show you the different modules. And for this particular module, I will assign a particular configuration of rules. You know that with RQA, you can establish a different set of rules for your different documents. So I have established this, this configuration, number 3. And then I can perform the assessment. You know that this assessment for 100 requirements is pretty quick. It has to be less than 10 seconds, approximately. And you got it, right? So most of my requirements are high quality, good, but I still have some of those requirements in low and medium quality. This is correctness. But let me, for now, let me show you, of course, the correctness, but mainly the completeness. This webinar is about completeness. So let me jump quickly into the definition of completeness. As you can see, the tool is telling me that my specification is far from being complete. So these are the 5 completeness metrics that I have created for this demo presentation. What is shown in this score is how incomplete you are, right? So the tool cannot tell you you are fully complete, but at least the tool can tell you which level of incompleteness we have found. As I mentioned before, as a reference for this completeness, we are taking exactly the same diagram as before, the same model as before, the tentative warrior, with all those logical components, physical components, the allocation, the functions, the state charts in here with all the modes and the transitions and so on and so forth. So this is the reference for this completeness assessment. Now let me show you a couple of those metrics. If we think of the completeness of the name of the states, you have seen the score. It was 0%. It is meaning that there is nothing missing. There are 6 states in my diagram, and all these 6 states are somehow mentioned in my specification at least once. As you can see here, it is not only that the tool is telling you that it appears at least once. If I go back a little bit, then I can see that combat mode appears 27 times, configuration mode 22 times. You can see this number of times in the left, right, in the right, sorry. Then if you click on requirements, you see that there are a total of 59 requirements out of these 138 that somehow are mentioning name of states or name of modes, right? So you can, from here, you can enter each one of them. But at least since the tool has told me that I am done, then I will now focus in another metric that where I am not fully done. There is a 20% missing transition names. So now let's focus on transitions between the states, right? I'm done 80%, good, but I'm missing 20%. So the tool can tell you what are the elements that the transitions, in this case, that are represented in the specifications. Of course, in order the tool to properly identify those requirements that are following a transition, you will have to write your requirements following a given pattern. If you write requirements without any given structure, perhaps the tool will not identify that there is a transition behind, right? But if you write following the patterns that you are offered, then the tool can very quickly identify, wow, this requirement is representing a transition. So that the tool can tell you, wow, there is a missing transition, right? So the transition between the configuration mode and the validation mode is missing. So I can now go to doors and create a new requirement in doors. So this is the doors view with the level of quality and so on. And then I am now creating a new requirement. I can create this new requirement, let's say, with free typing from scratch, but I decide that I'm better helped with the suggestions from the authoring tool. So I pick my pattern and I start typing. You can see that all those drop-down lists include name of modes and states, name of physical components, name of actions, and so on and so forth. All this information is coming from the ontology. This validation mode, this configuration mode, all this is coming from the, in this case, from the model, from the Capella model. So that the tool is telling me that this requirement is complete, it is correct, and it is now part of my specification. So that if I save my specification and go back to RQA, now I can check again the CCC approach, and I can see that it used to be 20% missing, but now, well, after reanalyzing, now I am 0% missing. I mean, all the possible transitions that are described in the model are somehow also represented in my specification, right? Of course, we could see other quality dimensions, like if I am mentioning all the physical components or not, and the tool is telling us that there is nothing about these 7 components, while the rest are fully done, right? So I think we can stop here. We are, of course, running out of time. I had another video, but I hope Cecilia can, in the post-production, can inject also this other video so that in the final recording, you have also this third scenario. Well, let's try now to check completeness for individual requirements. Now I'm going to create one additional requirement in doors. Okay, so something like when the temperature is 0, the temperature variable shall display visual alarm. Now the RAT tool is capable of detecting that 0 is missing the unit, 0 Celsius, 0 Fahrenheit. So if I write something like 0 Celsius, then it should be okay. However, now there is yet another metric which is triggered, which is the presence or the lack of tolerance. It's important to mention that when the requirement says something like when the temperature is below, for instance, is below 0, there is no need of tolerance, because below 0 means from minus whatever to 0, so the range is clear. However, if I say just 0, there is a lack of tolerance because it is very difficult to be 0. It could be 0.001, or it could be minus 0.001, but 0 exactly is difficult to reach. So this is why the tool can detect this kind of missing tolerances. Of course, if I say something like plus minus 10%, then now this is a valid tolerance. I hope that exactly now the tool tells me that this is okay. Or during authoring, it could be that we could open the room to say something like TBD. And since and now my configuration allows these kind of TBDs in for authoring, but as I will show you in a minute, not for inspection. So now, so far, according to my configuration, this requirement is okay. So I can save it here. This is my new requirement, high quality, as you can see here. And I save. And then let me now try this very same requirement in RQA. So I open RQA. However, I will take now a different role. I will take the role of inspection, supposing that this document is expected to be complete. Then now I don't allow any room for this kind of open-ended clauses like TBD, right? So I will change the configuration from the authoring configuration to the inspection configuration. And now I realize again my document. This document contains the last requirement I have just created. Okay, now scroll down, and this is my requirement. Now the same requirement that was considered as a high quality requirement during the authoring stage, because the TBD was considered okay for authoring. Now it is not okay. So I have to go back and say something like is below 0%, or I must write my temperature with tolerance. Now you can see that there are yet a couple of other metrics that appear here. One is the missing stakeholder attribute. I consider that in this specification, there should be always a stakeholder informed for every requirement, and these requirements are expected to have links to low-level requirements. Since I'm missing all these, then this is why now the tool is considering this requirement as a poor requirement, low quality. We can still go and check all the new metrics implemented at this level, dealing with requirement completeness or the completeness for individual requirements, and then I can see how many of my requirements are lacking. In this case, derivation link. So there is no link for all these requirements. This information is based on the requirements management system. In this case, is based on doors. Same for missing attributes. Missing attributes for a lot of my requirements. So all these requirements are missing the attribute stakeholder. There are now 4 different requirements with open-ended according to the last assessment, right? So aside from my previous requirement, I have these 3 other requirements with TBD or TBC. And finally, there is one requirement with a pronoun. In this case, it is the pronoun it, which is not welcome in my specification. So this is my pronoun. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Jose will answer your questions in a minute. So if you want to ask him anything, please write them down in the chat box, and you can address them to the reuse company. Meanwhile, I will give you some information about our next webinar. It's called Why Challenging the Consistency Metrics Might Benefit Your Requirements. Consistency is one of the most undervalued but extremely important issues regarding requirements quality. During this webinar, we will guide you through the basic notions of consistency described in the INCOSYS standard and show you how to take them to the next level with several practical examples supported by the Systems Engineering Suite. The dates for this webinar are the 19th and the 21st of October. So we have a couple of questions. The first one is was about the first demonstration video. Are those hyperlinks navigable? I mean, what if I click one of them?
Yeah, good question. Bad news is that at least in this version, those hyperlinks are not navigable. So you cannot click on them. We are fighting and struggling to try to have those hyperlinks navigable, but so far they are not. It is just to represent that this element is not just a piece of text. It is the name of a meaningful element, an important element in your model. And this allows us to generate the dependencies visually in the notation of Capella, the dependencies between the requirement and the element. But so far they are not navigable. Sorry.
Okay, so in the use cases, you showed how RAT helps to reach the completeness of individual requirements. But is it possible to have a real-time check of the specification completeness?
You mean if you mean for the whole set of requirements, the answer is no. When I open a new document and I start typing my very first requirement, it is not possible to check completeness for the set of requirements, because this is just my first requirement. However, what you can check is there is an option in the authoring tool. There is an option that tells you. Well, you are far from being complete for this metric, but at least I can tell you that this requirement is contributing to this metric. So suppose the metric that was rated as 20% missing before, as soon as I write this requirement, which is stating the transition that was missing, the authoring tool will not tell you you are complete, but will tell you, oh, this requirement is contributing somehow with a transition for this metric. But the RAT will not tell you that you are fully complete. You will have to go back to the RQA tool because consistency and completeness are better represented in the RQA tool. The RAT is more for individual requirements, one after the other.
Okay. One last question. What happens if I add new content to the knowledge base? Does it take into account this information in the calculation, or does it require additional configuration?
Normally, the metrics that you create for completeness and consistency, let's say, can grow with new information. The only thing you have to do is you have to reload the ontology. If someone in parallel, suppose that I open RQA for a completeness checking, and someone is injecting more elements in the ontology, those elements are not in the scope of RQA unless I close and open again, then the new content appears. Or there is an option in RQA and RAT, which is the reload ontology. This reload ontology is not only reloading our dictionaries and taxonomies and so on, but also if this ontology is connected to a Capella or Cameo or Rhapsody or Enterprise Architect model, then the new information from the model in real time, of course, not in real time, but after this reload of the ontology is available for me, telling me that perhaps now I am complete. But if you, for instance, Cecilia, you go and open Capella and create a new state and a new transition, and then I reload the ontology and I execute again the completeness analysis, then the tool will say, well, you were complete a minute ago, but you are no longer complete. There is a missing transition and a missing state, right? So all this information is not fully real time, but as soon as the user of RQA reloads the ontology, all this information is there automatically.
Okay, thank you. So let's finish here. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. If you have additional questions later or want more information about our tools, don't hesitate to contact us by email to contact@reusecompany.com or directly to Jose, of course. Or you can also visit our website, reusecompany.com. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day.